to a Sunday sort of morning service brought to you by the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Georgetown, Texas. I am Reverend Sandra Ingham, San Gabriel's interim minister. You might be watching this anytime, though, not necessarily on Sunday morning, the 31st of May. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever time you tune in, you are most welcome here. This church is a welcoming congregation and a green sanctuary. If you would like to know more about Unitarian Universalism in general, visit uua.org. To learn more about this congregation in particular, go to sangabrieluu.org. I have titled this service, Give Us Pleasure in the Flowers Today, words taken from a poem by Robert Frost, which are also the words of hymn number 64 in our gray hymnal. You will hear them spoken by me in a little bit. The order of service that I am using today is different from our usual one. There is not a wonder box moment, but there will be a story for all ages. There will be poems woven throughout this service. At the end of the service, there will be a virtual flower festival time towards the end. Not like flower celebrations that you may remember from previous years, because this year is unlike any previous year that most of us have experienced. Excuse me. I am hoping that during this next little bit of time, you will feel enveloped in memory, in beauty, in flowers, even if they are virtual, in some joy even. I hope that today we will remember that there are still elements like that in life that give us pleasure, elements such as beauty, flowers, stories, and memory. I have a couple of announcements, well, plus the one that I always say, please read The Messenger, our weekly newsletter. In this week's issue, you will find information about this association's annual General Assembly, to be held completely online this year from June 24th to the 28th. I am hoping that many of you who have never attended a General Assembly will register and take advantage of a unique opportunity to find out what GA is all about. There may never again be such an accessible, assuming you have access to the internet, and affordable General Assembly. We do have some scholarship money available, I think, so please let me know if you are interested in going to GA. This congregation's annual meeting will be held on Sunday, June 21st. There are things that you will be able to do before that date that we hope will help make our first ever online annual meeting go smoothly. More information in the newsletter. The Chalice Lighting words were written by Betsy Darr, slightly adapted. May the light of this chalice give light and warmth to our community when we are joyful and when we are in despair. And may we feel the warmth spread from our circle to wider and wider circles until all know that they belong to the one circle of life. The opening hymn is For the Beauty of the Earth, so sing with gusto, especially if you're alone there watching. Sing out.
Cool.
The opening words were written by Tim O'Brien. Stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for those late hours in the night when you can't remember how you got from where you were to where you are. Stories are for eternity when memory is erased, when there is nothing to remember except the story. Please sing or speak the words of our affirmation, whichever you are most comfortable doing. Now some poetry. Poems tell stories. Today I will share some poems with you, poems that are full of beauty, poems that I hope will give you pleasure, poems that may awaken memories, poems that may help you blossom like a flower, at least for a few moments, poems that tell stories. The first two I want to share with you were both written by Mary Oliver. This first one is titled, Why I Wake Early. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who make the morning and spread it over the fields and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories, and into the windows of even the miserable and the crotchety. Best preacher that ever was, dear star, that just happens to be where you are in the universe to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness, in kindness. And this one titled, Children, It's Spring. And this is the lady whom everyone loves, Ms. Violet, in her purple gown, or, on special occasions, a dress the color of sunlight. She sits in the mossy weeds and waits to be noticed. She loves dampness. She loves attention. She loves especially to be picked by careful fingers, young fingers, entranced by what has happened to the world. We, the older ones, call it spring, and we have been through it many times. But there is still nothing like the children bringing home such happiness in their small hands. And now a story for all ages, which I titled, The Capek Children Go Shopping. For all the young people who might be watching this part of the service, I want to introduce you to a famous Unitarian minister. His name is Norbert Capek, and this is a true story. And for those of you older folks watching right now, these are stories about Capek that I did not include in last week's service, which was all about Norbert Capek. Norbert Capek invented the first flower festival used in our churches, our Unitarian Universalist churches. Now, I might have borrowed parts of it and gotten some ideas from churches in the United States, most likely a UU congregation in Rochester, New York. But Reverend Capek held the first ever flower festival in his church, which was a very big church. Eventually, 10,000 people belonged to that church. And his church was in Europe, in a country called Czechoslovakia. Maybe you can look that up later. Czechoslovakia. This very first flower ceremony happened in 1922, or maybe 1923, we're not real sure, but at any rate, it was almost 100 years ago. Can you imagine that? 100 years ago. It caught on quickly in our country and in other parts of Europe and the rest of the world too, eventually. So I'll tell you a little bit about the flower ceremony, but first I want to tell you more about Reverend Capek. I think that you, all you young people out there, would have just loved Reverend Capek because he loved children and he very, very much enjoyed being around them. And he loved to get down on the ground all his life and play with them and teach them. He had 11 children of his own even. Here is how he got them to be quiet when they were being a bit too loud. And this little story within my story is told by one of Capek's daughters. She wrote this down some time ago. Well, it would help if I went to the right page. Okay, here we are. And that was, which daughter? I will not say this word correctly because I don't speak a lot of Czech, but this was Bodana, and she married into the Haspel family. She says at home, family music often made things joyous, and she said we had a family orchestra. All of us played on some instrument under the supervision of our music teacher, who always prepared with us a concert for the holidays and for Father's birthdays especially. Our musical instruments consisted of a triangle, buglehorn, timpan, nightingale whistle, and a piano. Later, Father conducted these family concerts himself. It brought a lot of joy to Father and to us, but sometimes we made too much noise. Poor Father. How could he stand the hallooing of a flock of, at this point, 9 healthy children? But he knew how to quiet us down, for which he had his own method. So here is his method. When the noise came to the peak and Father couldn't stand it anymore, he came out of his study and appeared at the open nursery door and did not frown, but smiled and started to hello, hello, hello with us. And he cranked it up to be louder. He coached us. He coaxed and coached and encouraged us to do louder and louder, hallooing, hallooing, till we couldn't anymore. And then he asked us to soften our voices, little by little, till we were quiet as little church mice. Then Father started to sing a song of quiet meditation, which we sang with him. And now I'm going back to my study to work, when you are so good and so quiet. And off he went. He was a funny man, too. And when I say that, I mean that he loved to have fun. He loved jokes. He loved playing jokes on people. Never anything mean, just funny things that would make people laugh, even though they might be a little embarrassed at first if the joke was on them. I understand that he loved to put a snowball on the seat of a fellow classmate in school when that classmate got up to write something on the board or to recite something. I know that you all can't do that very often here in Central Texas, but I think you know what snowballs are. Norbert and his wife Marie did not believe in making their children go to Sunday school. Do you know what I mean when I say Sunday school? That's what you do on Sunday mornings when you come to this space, and now you do it with Karina online. Well, we usually call our Sunday school RE, which is a short way of saying religious education. But Norbert's children wanted to go to Sunday school with their friends, so they went shopping. Sunday school shopping, that is. At first, they didn't have much luck. They would go home and their parents would ask them what they learned that morning, what they did in Sunday school with their friends. "What did you learn?" Papa would ask. He did not like what he was hearing, did not like the answers. His children were not learning to think for themselves and to accept people's beliefs that were different from their own. He would then say to his children, "Try another church." This went on for some time, until finally one church was different. In late fall of 1920, the children found the Unitarian Church of Essex County, New Jersey. Yes, the family was living in the United States then. It was not safe for their father to be in Czechoslovakia in 1920. And there they were at the Unitarian Church of Essex County, New Jersey. The minister was Walter Hunt, and he knew Thomas Masaryk, a progressive, forward-looking Czechoslovakian who would become the president of Czechoslovakia. So you could say that Capek's children had a great deal to do with their fathers becoming a famous Unitarian minister. Not long after he became a Unitarian minister, Reverend Capek started something that he called a flower festival. And we're going to have a small flower festival this morning, but we're not going to be able to exchange or trade flowers in person, obviously, because we're doing everything online right now. But if you were here with me in this sanctuary space at the fellowship building, I would now have some flowers for each one of you to pick from. So let's pretend that I am now holding a bouquet, and I'm going to ask you some questions, which of course I can still do that. Are these flowers all the same? Are they same color, same shape? No, of course they're not. Are flowers then kind of like people? Because we come in different colors and different sizes and different shapes, don't we? But how are the flowers the same? Lots of ways, really. All of them need air and water and sunshine, and they all grow in dirt in the earth, don't they? Do we want all the flowers, excuse me, or all people to bloom at the same time? Do we want them all to look alike after they bloom? No, we do not. All of the flowers or all of the people? No, I don't anyway. I think they might make life that might make life not very interesting and maybe even boring. At that first flower festival, Norbert Capek said, "These flowers are like ourselves, different colors, different shapes, and different sizes, each needing different kinds of care, but each beautiful, each important, and each special in its own way." So now I'm going to end my story for all ages and share some more poems with everyone. Of course, the younger people in our audience are, as always, invited to stay for as much or as little of this service as they want. More poetry. Excuse me. is the Robert Frost poem, "Oh, give us pleasure in the flowers today." Oh, give us pleasure in the flowers today, and give us not to think so far away as the uncertain harvest. Keep us here all simply in the springing of the year. Oh, give us pleasure in the orchard white, like nothing else by day, like ghosts by night, and make us happy in the happy bees, the swarm dilating round the perfect trees, and make us happy in the darting bird that suddenly above the bees is heard, the meteor that thrusts in with needle bill and off a blossom in midair stands still, for that is love, and nothing else is love, the which is served for God above, to sanctify to what far ends he or she will, but which it only needs that we fulfill. And, of course, another Mary Oliver poem titled "The Poet Comments on Yet Another Approaching Spring." Don't flowers put on their prettiness each spring and go to it with everything they've got? Who would criticize the bed of yellow tulips or the blue hyacinths? So put a bracelet on your ankle or your wrist with a bell on it, and make a little music for the earth beneath your foot, or wear a hat with hot colored ribbons for the pleasure of the leaves and the clouds, or at least a ring with a gleaming stone for your finger. Yesterday I watched a mother choose exquisite ear ornaments for someone beloved in the spring of her life. They were for her, for sure, but also it seemed a promise, a love message, a commitment to all girls and boys too. So beautiful and hopeful in this hard world, and young. As most of you know, this would be the time in the service, right around here anyway, when we would pass the offering plate. We cannot do that in the present time, so we are exploring other ways to gracefully and gently remind you that your monetary gifts are always welcome and they are needed, especially in this time of crisis. There will be information about giving online at the end of the musical interlude, and then again at the end of the postlude, the final piece of our service. Some poetry. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. William Blake. and another Oliver one, which she titles In Praise of Craziness of a Certain Kind. On cold evenings, my grandmother, with ownership of half her mind, the other half having flown back to Bohemia, spread newspapers over the porch floor too, she said, or so she said, the garden ants could crawl beneath, as under a blanket, and keep warm. And what shall I wish for myself, but, being so struck by the lightning of years, to be like her with what is left, that loving. I invite you now into a moment of silence, followed by our breathing meditation. The Singular and Cheerful Life by Mary Oliver. The singular and cheerful life of any flower in anyone's garden or any still unowned field, if there are any, catches me by the heart, by its color, by its obedience to the holiest of laws. Be alive until you are not. Ragweed, pale violet bull thistle, morning glories curling through the field corn, and those princes of everything green, the grasses of which there are truly an uncountable company, each on its singular stem, striving to rise and ripen. What in the earth world is there not to be amazed by, and to be steadied by, and to cherish? Oh, my dear heart, my own dear heart, full of hesitations, questions, choice of directions. Look at them. Behold the morning glory, the meanest flower, the ragweed, the thistle. Look at the grass. And still Oliver, but another poem, which she titles The Gardener. Have I lived enough? Have I loved enough? Have I considered right action enough? Have I come to any conclusion? Have I experienced happiness with sufficient gratitude? Have I endured loneliness with grace? I say this, or perhaps I'm just thinking it. Actually, I probably think too much. Then I step out into the garden, where the gardener, who is said to be a simple man, is tending his children, the roses. Stories give us beauty, the beauty of being connected through love and memory. So I have two other stories about Capek to bring us joy and beauty this morning. This first one was written by Capek himself. We have to remember that he was almost always under surveillance when he was a minister, even before the Nazis came to power. This story is told about him. They're his words, but they are written into story form by Richard Henry, one of his biographers. Constantly, Capek was aware that his activities were being carefully watched. He would enjoy, in later years, describing how one evening the gendarmes, having learned of his radical preaching, decided to raid his prayer service. The room was packed. The policemen put their ears to the door, heard Capek's booming voice, and at a signal they burst into the hall, ordering everyone present to leave. Meanwhile, they looked about for the congregation's leader, who, judging by his voice, they assumed must be quite a husky fellow. 5'5" was Capek's height. 5'5" Capek slipped quickly and quietly past the gendarmes as they continued their search. His members delighted in telling this story too, but for others it only confirmed what they'd been told. Anyone who at will could make himself disappear was clearly in league with the devil. And then this is in Capek's words. Walking, and he calls it the story of the peripatetic umbrella, and I give it to you as an example of what a fun person he was. Walking downtown one afternoon, he spied a discarded umbrella lying in a ditch. He picked it up and he tried it out and then tossed it aside when it refused to open. A small boy picked it up and ran after him to return it. Capek decided then to play a prank. He entered a bookstore, dropped the umbrella in the umbrella stand by the door, and went to the back of the store where he could keep his eye on the front door. Moments later, a woman appeared, cast a quick glance around, seized the umbrella, and went out the door. Finding it didn't work, she too threw it in the gutter. A little girl picked it up and ran after the woman to return it. Maybe even today, Capek mused many years later, that umbrella is still circulating around Hamburg. As I said in last week's service, Norbert Capek was one of those larger-than-life figures and way ahead of his time. I would say that he is still way ahead of his time. Human times, that is. Remember, Capek asked in the 1930s, what keeps us from creating a new world? We are still trying to answer this question. In the story for all ages, I talked to our young people about some similarities between humans and flowers. Well, there are other similarities that we didn't mention during the story. That's right. Flowers are fragile, and so are we. But flowers are also tough, and so are we. The life of a flower is fleeting, and so are our lives. Flowers are exuberant, and by that I mean their colors and shapes are amazing, outlandish even. Flowers bring a smile to our faces when we pay attention to them. Flowers bring out not only exuberance in us, but also joyfulness. And now, more than ever, we need to be reminded that, like flowers, we can be exuberant and joyful, if even for short moments, if only for short moments. Capek recognized this and the power of flowers to bring joy into our lives and to show us the power and the importance of differences, and to emphasize how flowering, coming into bloom, is what our lives are about. How do we blossom? How do we help others blossom into their full potential? Flowers and people are all different, yet all the same in their needs and their coming of age, so to speak. They're coming into fullness. They're achieving their potential. Think about the blooming aspect of flowers and its similarity to the blooming of human beings. In order that every human can bloom into their full potential, each one needs water, food, air, dirt, or earth. We interfere with an individual's blooming whenever we take away water, sun, air, dirt, and I am using those four words both literally and as metaphors. We retard the blooming of a person's growth for the most ridiculous, senseless reasons, because we don't like someone's color or shape or size or ethnicity or sexual orientation or gender preference or religious beliefs or non-beliefs, and on it goes. And then we continue to kill black men by white men. When will it stop? When will we realize that we are here to bloom, each in our own time, and no matter our color, our size, or our shape? As I said to the children, do we want all the flowers or all the people to bloom at the same time? Do we want them all to look alike after they bloom, all of the flowers or all of the people? No. Flowers can help us super-rational Unitarian Universalists be less rationalistic and get out of our heads, and believe me, that is always a good thing. Not only that, but I believe that it is a necessary aspect of being human, acting from our hearts as well as our heads. One day, about 2 years ago maybe, I was at the farmer's market in Madison, Wisconsin, and I had gathered a lot of flowers because we were having the flower festival that next day on Sunday, and I thought, well, I always think this, what if nobody brings any flowers? I better take a lot. And walking around half of the square with those flowers in my arm, I recommend this, I recommend it highly. There was a homeless man who looked at what I was carrying and just lit up with joy. And then there were instant smiles on people's faces when they looked at what I had in my arms. Remember the flower power movement, if we can still call it that, of the 1960s, and the flower children? Remember the young woman trying to give a heavily armed and armored policeman a flower while he stood there in her face, this close to her, perhaps about to arrest her, with his gun pointing at her. Once upon a time in a congregation that I was serving, I planned a flower ceremony, and there was muttering. I heard comments about how silly it was to bring a flower, put it with other flowers, and then pass all those around, and finally take a different flower from the one that you had brought. What was the point, really? What possible good could come from such a ritual? And it is a ritual, a distinctly Unitarian ritual adopted by our Universalist congregations too. Clearly, some folks in that previous congregation of mine did not understand the meaning to us Unitarian Universalists of our flower festival, what we wouldn't give right this minute to be able to actually pass those flowers around, take a different one from the one we brought, and then ponder the one we have in our hand, face to face with that flower. I hope that some of these words of mine and of Capek's and of the poets will remind you of the ritual or introduce you to it if you were not familiar with it before today. I hope that the stories and the beauty and the memories shared this morning will move you, energize you, bring you joy, make you smile, give you hope, that the power of love will triumph over the power of hate. For flowers can be a symbol of defiance, a celebration of differences, a shout out for hope in an increasingly dark world, a reminder that there is much beauty in our world. 2 final poems, and of course they're by Mary Oliver. The first she titles Roses. Everyone now and again wonders about those questions that have no ready answers. First cause, God's existence. What happens when the curtain goes down and nothing stops it? Not kissing, not going to the mall, not the Super Bowl. Wild roses. I said to them one morning, Do you have the answers? And if you do, would you tell me? The roses laughed softly. Forgive us, they said. But as you can see, we are just now entirely busy being roses. And the last one from Oliver. Fresh in the, she said. So I put them in the sink, for the cool porcelain was tender. And I took out the tattered and cut each stem on a slant, trimmed the black and raggy leaves, and set them all roses, delphiniums, daisies, iris, lilies, and more whose names I don't know, in bright new water. Gave them a bounce upward at the end to let them take their own choice of position, the wheels, the spurs, the little sheds of the buds. It took to do this perhaps 15 minutes. 15 minutes of music with nothing playing. Here are some words spoken by Reverend Norbert Capek when he introduced that very first flower festival on the first anniversary of the founding of his church in Prague, Czechoslovakia. Getting there. We are trying to find new experiences of our religious life, very slowly and carefully. Whereas the dedication of a child, weddings and burials were kept rather close to the general Unitarian custom, we have made a new experiment in symbolizing our liberty and brotherhood in a service which was so powerful and impressive that I never experienced anything like it. The most dry and rationalistic members were moved, and many and I brightened through tears. On that very Sunday, it was the last before Holy Days, everybody was supposed to bring with him a flower, and in the middle of the big hall was a suitable table with a big vase where everybody put his or her flower, some lady members helping to do it nicely. The sight of the many beautiful flowers was wonderful, and more of them were coming, solemnly yet joyfully, with full understanding of the meaning. We had a common song. I read 1 Corinthians 13, and in my sermon I put emphasis on the individual characteristics of each member flower, on our liberty as a foundation of our fellowship. And then I emphasized our common cause, our belonging together as one spiritual community, as brethren. And when they go home, each is to take one flower, just as it comes, without making any distinction where it came from and whom it represents, to confess that we accept each other as brothers and sisters without regard to class, race, or other distinction, acknowledging everybody as our friend who is a human and wants to be good. And then after the sermon, the flowers were brought to the platform, a prayer was said, including a dedication, and all standing sang, which was the culmination of the service. It also happened that we had 2 weddings following, which added to the tune of the whole. And then the flowers were brought back to the old place to make access easy for everybody, as the place was crowded to the utmost. After all these experiences, nobody dares to say anymore that we are so rationalistic as to have nothing for the heart. That was Norbert Capek's first flower ceremony, flower festival. I invite you now to enjoy our virtual version of the annual flower festival. The closing hymn is titled Color and Fragrance, and both the words and the music are by the Reverend Norbert Capek. The last sentence of each verse, and yes, I would love it if you would sing all the verses, the last sentence of each verse contains the words, God's vision growing. But I know that this congregation is sophisticated enough and comfortable enough with the word God, so that you will not allow that use of that word to distract you from meaningful text. Just realize that God is a shorthand word and encompasses a range of meanings, including spirit of life, spirit of all that is, the ground of all being, that which ultimately concerns us, or simplest and most elegant of all, love. Enjoy the hymn. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And the closing words, this will not surprise you, were written by Norbert Capek. In the name of providence, which implants in the seed the future of the flower, and in our hearts the longing for people to live in harmony. In the name of the highest, in whom we move and who makes the mother and father, the brother and sister, lover and loner what they are. In the name of sages and great religious leaders who sacrificed their lives to hasten the coming of the age of mutual respect. Let us renew our resolution sincerely to be real sisters and brothers, regardless of any kind of bar which estranges us from each other. In this holy resolve, may we be strengthened, knowing that we are all part of one family, that one Spirit, the Spirit of love, unites us, and endeavor for a more perfect and a more joyful life. Amen. May it be so. Go in peace until we are together again.